Well, good afternoon or good evening if you're in the USA, or if you are overseas, or like my guest, it's either Friday night or Super Saturday morning. I am Bruce, aka the guy in the blue shirt, and my method is simpler, faster, better. And actually, how I use that is I help business owners, entrepreneurs, and high performing leaders like my guest to do process cleanup. So, welcome, Rebecca, all the way from. I didn't ask you about the weather. That's the usual thing I should ask for a UK visitor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's dark, it's a bit chilly. Yeah, it's just about 8 o'clock here in the UK. I'm in Worcestershire, which is a
Mhm.
lovely part of the West Midlands,
It
not
is.
far away from Wales.
Mhm.
And yeah, absolutely. Anybody that's in the UK will know that we're having a little bit of a cold spell at the moment. So
Well, funny enough, people don't realize, I live in the desert, but people don't realize that it rains and it actually gets cold here. So we've actually had both. We had rain, thunder, and overnight frosts here, even in the desert. So it's been
yeah,
similar
no,
for
I
us.
definitely prefer summer. Except for if I'm skiing, and then I definitely want more snow.
Yes, I saw, and you've been on an adventure. So anyway, so let me set this up. So if you are in the comments, please let us know, because it says there are some comments that aren't going to show. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but let me see. And yeah, in the meantime, let me, here we go. It might work now. Sometimes if I click off it and come back, it works. So if you are in the comments and we don't see you or respond to what you're saying, it's because we can't see it on our side in the comments. So the joys of live streaming. So whatever. So a little context, just want to set this up. So, people always say to me, well, how do you find your guests, or how do you find such amazing people? Well, we were talking offline in what they call the green room. It's a process. I'm a process guy. I'm a process whiz, and I use what is called the 4 C's, which is the conversation start. And we started in a conversation on somebody else's posts, and I was enamored about what you were doing in the service industry with process improvement. And then that led to a connection, that led to a Zoom, that led to oh, we have a lot in common here. Not only was I born in the UK and you're in the UK, but we both did extensive process improvement or operational excellence in the service industry. So it's through those conversations that deepen the connection, and the connection then leads to, ideally a community, right? I'm very lucky. I've got some amazing process improvement, quality improvement, OPEX people in my network. And so that's my little community. And then who knows, it may lead to collaborations like this, right? A discussion around. So I wanted to set up that context because, again, we were also chatting offline about a pet peeve, which is to be pitch slapped. So let me ask you, how do you deal with the pitch slap before we lean into the root of the conversation here?
Well, like we were talking about in the green room, I'm incredibly inquisitive and curious about people, and as soon as I get that kind of pitch slap environment, or I'm hit with that in my DMs, it's for me the instant is to go back and ask more questions, be inquisitive, and lean in to asking
Right.
the questions that I feel are relevant to that particular pitch. Now, unfortunately, we all know that's often where the conversation finishes.
Yeah, yeah, we were talking about it's a shame that people are measured on the amount of new connections or the amount of outreach they might have done, and that only encourages click, connect, shop, or click, shop, connect, whichever way people want to do it. And if they would only be measured on how many real connections and potential collaborations did you come up with, it would drive a completely different behavior. So talk to me a little bit about your view of leaning in. And I took that term because for people that may not know, that aren't in our trade, lean is one of the tools of process improvement or operational excellence. And the other reason I took it as the title, I saw a recent post by the leader of your company about how we're being very accountable or accommodating for people with certain needs. So chat to me a little bit about leaning in and what all that means to you and how you put that into practice in your new role.
Of course. Well, let me just start by saying thank you so much for hosting me tonight, Bruce. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and it's thrilled to be talking to you about my world, what it means to me, and also how I've used that lean in process to not only in my environment for work, but also in my personal life as well. And
Right.
you know, it really is, as we've discussed, a physical manifestation of quite a, I guess, personal response to things that have happened to me in the past. And what I've experienced as well, you know, the most changeable periods of my life have been because someone else has lent in and really tried to understand me, the process that I'm going through, and perhaps the adversity that I'm facing. And so leaning in really meant for me the ability to lean into discomfort, lean into adversity, lean into a solution provision, not only for myself, but also for my colleagues, my connections, and the people around me that made up my climate, in essence.
Right.
And that is bound from that inquisitive nature, that curiosity, wanting to know more about what people are going through, what people like, what they don't like. That emotional intelligence really allows you to know more about your teams in a workplace environment, but also around the people that kind of make up your world as well, which is hugely important and actually very enjoyable as well.
Yeah, sure. So interesting, you used a different word for what we were talking about, community. So did you say climate?
Yes, yeah.
That's kind of cool. Yeah. So we all know what weather climates are like. They're a mixed bag of everything, right? And it's interesting because the people that do become part of your community, and definitely the ones that you have to help collaborate with either through facilitation or leading them as a high performing leader like yourself, it gets really interesting how you have to individualize everything. So so talk a little bit about that, because I know how I try and individualize my connection with each team member. And then, when you're kind of on point facilitating the whole team or leading the whole team and that role changes. So tell us a little bit about a couple of little tips and from, a couple of tips from Rebecca about, what have you found successful when you do that individually and in a team?
Absolutely. For me, it's all about authenticity and the genuine nature of your interest in that person. If you are an authentic person yourself, then it absolutely leads to a connection through the vulnerability that you're able to show. But also, if you are genuinely interested in what that person is going through, what they can bring to your business, what talents they have, or the ideas that they might have in terms of the process management, certainly in a workplace environment, then you can breed such an amount of energy and focus within that individual conversation. So the authenticity and the genuine nature of your interest is absolutely crucial.
Absolutely. And I am listening to you. I'm still playing around behind the scenes. I can't get the comments to work. So, I'm a process guy. They keep sending me all these messages, and I click on the messages, and it's like, well, I don't know how to fix it. They don't tell you actually how to fix it. They just tell you that.
That's absolutely fine.
Won't get comments. How about that? But hey, they all show up on the replay, so that's encouraging. Yeah. So what have been some of the significant benefits that you could maybe happenstance upon, either from an individual level or again for the team? Because you've stepped into a new team environment, right? So you're kind of starting over, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, completely right. And what you say about, kind of the key moments for me and perhaps the moments of truth, it goes right back to when I started my career. I've been in insurance and the financial industry for over 20 years. And those moments where people have lent into me and really brought about change and transformation for me are then platforms that I can go to and call upon to be that person for somebody else. And it may be mentoring. For me, mentoring has been a huge environment of growth, I have been able to be reverse mentored by, much younger members of my team, but also people who I mentor in schools. It's been a massive state of growth for me, and really something that when you're seeking out that kind of environment of growth, you can kind of miss that. That can be a blind spot.
Right.
But by leaning in and having that emotional intelligence and being open-minded enough to admit that you have some vulnerabilities, you can create that real kind of dynamic state where you are able to be reverse mentored, it's hugely beneficial for both people.
Right. Yeah. And some people talk about that in terms of, make sure you're not only a mentor, but be a mentee and be open-minded. And you remind me of a great story because one of the operational roles I had just before I left the UK was interesting. And I was able to create a collaboration with the high school, which is where the company was located. We were a couple of blocks or a couple of streets away from the big high school. And I ended up being able to offer some high school people an opportunity to kind of come to work with me, and literally, and they would come in a couple of hours, a few mornings a month. And it was amazing because I would say to them, just, hey, let's just walk around. And then I would ask them, hey, what do you see? What do you think is like honked up here? What do you think is going good? And it's amazing because their observation was completely different than mine.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And so that was exciting. But what was really exciting is when, I let them loose on a project and I said, pick a project. And everyone said to me, Bruce, you're like nuts. You're like, these high school kids are just going to mess up, tear up. But they didn't do any of that. So that was a great example. I always remember people saying to me, Bruce, you're crazy. Like, what if they came up with all the what ifs they did? It's like, just chill. Let's just see.
Absolutely.
And I've never forgot. I don't remember the precise thing, but I've never forgotten when they did the outbrief. Like the little summary of what they learned, and it was amazing. And then the flip side of that is because I'd done that. The head teacher of the high school actually invited me into the classroom and said, hey, come observe me with the same kids in the classroom. And then at the end of that, I was given the opportunity to observe and give feedback to them and say, what went well, what wasn't going so well. And it was amazing because the teacher didn't understand how they were losing the interest of a lot of these very sharp kids. And and so that was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. I think, when you do have the ability to lean in and try and understand someone and be authentic, and particularly with different generations, like you've said there, inviting them in, but inviting them to fail, inviting them to make mistakes.
Right.
And that's hugely powerful when you start accepting the fact that failure is the first attempt in learning, and we're moving that forward with that level of understanding that things might go wrong. Actually, that's a different energy focus completely, and it shifts people's mindset. One of the things that you and I spoke about when we first connected was that idea of no box. What would you do if there was no box? And it blew my mind.
Yeah, for sure. Oh dear. Sorry, I'm messing around here, and now I've done something really weird. Okay. All right. I think this is my last process fix chance. We'll see. We will see. If not, I'm going to give up. And I'm sorry. I was listening to you again. Yeah. So the whole no box thing is it's kind of a very advanced way of thinking. And how you get there is, first of all, you have to be open-minded. And then a lot of people are very familiar with, just kind of let go and, get out of the box, right?
Mhm.
That's what you hear a lot, is out of the box thinking. Well, I've been able, with high performing teams and the individuals and some senior leaders and or business owners before, I've been able to get them to understand, I would ask them, well, what if there's no box? What if there's absolutely no restraints, no constraints? and no resource limitations. You know, how would you want your business to be? And when people start thinking in that limitless, no boundaries arena, it's unbelievable the amount of ideas they'll come up with. I mean, they'll come up with some goofy stuff, which is okay. But some of that goofy stuff sticks. And
it takes practice, though. You know, we're so conditioned to thinking a certain way. And even when you start thinking, all right, I've got to start thinking outside the box, suddenly the whole mindset is, oh yeah, but I can still see the box. It's still absolutely there. And it doesn't allow for that creativity. And it really takes practice. And it's leaning into that practice. It's leaning into that energy and focus and having that, you know, mindset shift completely. So you can just put aside that idea that you had previously of what could constrain you and restrain you and think really differently.
Well, and it's also about, you talked about climate, and I would liken that to environment as well. And I remember this to the day. I can even remember the temperature, the smell. The first time I really got into trouble in my first job in the USA was I was working with a team, and we were stuck. We were in a meeting room. There was no windows. We were at deadlock. We couldn't figure out any which way to fix this problem. So, you know, I don't know what caused me to do this, but I just happened to hear, we went for a break, and I just happened to hear the ice cream van run by with the bells and everything. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go buy these guys ice cream. So I went out to the street, bought everyone ice cream. And instead of bringing it back into the meeting room, we sat outside in the garden. Well, I didn't know at that time, but the window for the president of the whole division's office overlooked that garden. So I'm out there, middle of work time. It's not a regular break time. I'm out there, you know, so-called goofing off with the team eating ice cream. And 20 minutes later, we finished the meeting, which helped. They got kind of unstuck. And, you know, I get this call, and they said, hey, Mike wants to see you. So I do the walk up what they call Walnut Row. He had a very old-fashioned office with wood paneling. So
oh my goodness.
I went down, and he said, what the heck were you doing, like goofing off outside of break time? And I said, well, first of all, I wasn't goofing off. Secondly, we were stuck. Thirdly, I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to buy more ice cream, see if it would unlock their thinking. And he said, well, did it work? And I said, yeah. And he said, awesome.
You got away with it.
I did get away with it, but I learned a good lesson, which was, you know, make sure if you're going to do something different in a place inside of a workplace, make sure you know which windows are overlooked by whom.
Oh, yeah. Very important to know the geography of your office building.
Correct. So know your climate, know your environment, and yeah, just be cautious, right? But hey, I got away with it, and we got unstuck, and it's funny because fast forward a few months, I was always working on multiple projects, but I was putting together a new team, and one of the people, and I used to ask for volunteers instead of telling people, instead of voluntolding or voluntelling people, I used to ask for volunteers. And somebody came at me one day and said, do we get ice cream if we volunteer? So it like spread.
Very cheeky.
I said, sure, but you have to make the results.
Yeah. Get results, get ice cream.
Yeah, that's right. So that was always one of my trademarks. Oh, well, Bruce will buy you ice cream if you either get stuck or you do a good job. So.
If it's an incentive and it works, then absolutely, you know. But I think it's a really interesting point there that you made in terms of a change in climate, a change in environment, and that it did unlock their creativity, giving them opening out that room into the garden, into the environment that was outside and had no limitations and was absolutely different to their cubicle or their office. It allowed them to really think differently. And again, that's kind of leaning into human nature. You know, you feel so much freer when you're in the mountains or in an environment that's different to your work. And I've been in companies where it's actively encouraged to take a break, you know, have that half an hour where you have a walk, have a think, really mull over what you've been told, really consider how you can add value in the next call. Don't just hop from call to call, because you do become very stagnant. And you know, that is that, you know, although sometimes it doesn't always unstick you, quite often it will. You know, you'll really think about something differently.
Yeah. Well, I actually, at least for 5 out of my 7 days, I take what I call a digital walk break, which is normally late afternoon. And I purposely, you know, walk away from the computer and I stand up. I have a stand-up workstation, so I'm lucky. But even through standing up all day, I mean, that helps with my creativity. I don't know if you've ever tried that, but, you know, getting people not to sit down at their workstations, also getting people not to sit down in the meeting rooms or brainstorming room, you know, whatever. I find that if you take the chairs away from a meeting space, sometimes it goes a whole lot faster and more creative. But yeah, I go for a walk break and I purposely go look at how the flowers are doing here, because we have amazing things happen here. When it does rain and thunderstorm like the other day, it blows all the leaves off the plants so that, you know, so there's no flowers or anything. But within 2 days, when the sun comes back out, they grow like crazy.
Oh my goodness, that must be amazing.
It is, yeah. It's
And what environment to find yourself in where you've got that kind of really quick, you know, renewal actually happening in front of your eyes.
Right. Well, that's why I go do it. So I go remind myself that, you know, it's just another day and the storm came and blew the old leaves away. And that's kind of, you know, in a workplace environment, well, you know, that was a day, it blew the work away, and maybe we can do it with fresh renewal tomorrow, you know, in a different way. So,
and, you know, and when I think about where I've had people leaning into me and where I've lent into other people and where we've really had that fantastic mindset and energy switch, it's been where, you know, we have been in debate, we have been in opposition, or we haven't absolutely agreed on something, but either a group of us or just the two of us have decided we're going to go away, we're going to have that space, we're going to recalibrate our minds, come back and see whether or not we can find some level of common ground. And so again, using that energy and that focus and leaning into the things that bring you closer together, the vulnerabilities and the shifts in mindset, and sometimes the adversity, being open about that and coming back together after that does give you the ability to very much think differently and sometimes think about it from a different point of view.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you should say that, because one of the elements I look for is, you know, how mature the high performing team is, or high performing work group, whatever you want to call them, is that when they recognize it is okay to disagree. And it is okay to agree upon the fact we're not always going to agree. And then the other thing that I watch for, and it's a technique that I teach, is that if you reach that point, then throw it up onto the wall in what we either call a parking lot. If you're dealing with a general office, most offices have parking lot or parking garages. Put it up there and just let it sit there for a while. Or when I was in the aircraft satellite business, we used to make a place called the hangar, which is, you know, a hangar for the aircraft hangar. And again, if there's a failure to agree, or let's agree to disagree, we just used to put it in the hangar and let it bubble away there. And sometimes those issues would stay on the walls for weeks, and it's okay. But what is interesting is later on, they usually reach or seek their own resolution. It's amazing.
And that you know, and that really is the understanding of the climate. You know, if you can get people together and understand as a community, they create the climate of energy and focus and of authenticity and idea generation. And if you can coach that climate and facilitate that climate, it suddenly becomes such an amazing productive space, because people are working together and they feel very comfortable having those uncomfortable conversations. And again, being comfortable in discomfort, leaning into that feeling, sitting with it, working it through, making sure that you are insightful around how that might affect other people. It just allows you to be so much more insightful, not only to your own kind of generation of ideas and solution provision, but also that of others.
So if I know we can't see the comments, but I'm lucky some people that are in the comments would put quotes in there for me. So you said something really important there, is getting comfortable with being in the uncomfortable space of either the situation or the climate. And that is not for everybody, including me. Sometimes I walk away from it or shy away from it. But again, what I found is if you can really help the team get through that, particularly as a whole team, individually, yes, it's super important. But more importantly, if you can get the whole work group or the whole team to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, it is unbelievable the solutions that they will come up with, because they get into this they get into this unlimited, no box, I don't really care what I say kind of thing. And as long as they're polite or not rude, it's okay. They can do it, right?
And the amazing thing about being comfortable with being uncomfortable is that people have different levels of comfort zones. So someone will come out of their comfort zone way before someone else they might be sitting next to. So of course, then you have a really interesting point of view where you've got one member of the team who is feeling really uncomfortable. They feel like they left their comfort zone 5 or 10 minutes ago, but then they're sitting next to somebody who is absolutely stuck in their comfort zone still and still needs a little bit of a prod to get out. And so the dynamic within a team, when that is created, is in itself this kind of infusion of energy because again, you've got those really interesting conversations happening and people are leaning in, people are trying to understand each other, and on the whole they're being respectful and authentic and genuine in that. But there is that real kind of stimulation that happens when you have slight differences in where people are in that kind of spectrum of comfort.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm sure you've not made this mistake, but I've made that mistake before where I see somebody then becomes kind of loud and, overconfident versus somebody that's super quiet, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I've made negative commentary about that, why don't you calm down a little bit? And then I try and get the person that is quiet to say something, and they don't want to say something because they haven't gotten to that point where they're comfortable about wanting to be uncomfortable. And I've made that mistake a lot. And it's tough because, people don't forgive you then when you...
And it's frightening, it's frightening for some people to be in that spot where they're not really sure what to say. They're not sure whether or not what they say is going to be right or wrong, or they're going to be chastised for that. And if you have got somebody who has moved on very quickly and is very confident, that in itself can be quite intimidating to the rest of the group as well. And when I think about leaning in and that community, and particularly when I'm leading a team, being a facilitator is a real key skill. And I don't get it right. There are lots of times when I don't get it right, but really spotting that and helping that journey and really talking into people's focus around moving themselves out and being on that journey and having that insight is absolutely essential.
Yeah. And you use that word facilitator. I've never forgotten I worked for one organization, and actually I had a high performing leader as the leader. And she was absolutely insistent, even though I hated it, to be blunt. She was absolutely insistent that everybody that worked on the lean or process improvement activities under her watch, we all had to go to the National Facilitators Council 1 week course on advanced facilitation, which was brutal.
Yes.
Especially if you're a behavioral introvert like me, super brutal. And at the time I fought it, and I fought every hour of every day that I was there. But it's amazing because fast forward, I'm a slow learner in some things. But when I look back, and I still tap into those skills and those role plays and stuff that we did then that at the time I hated. I was like, give me an excuse, any excuse to go to the bathroom, go for a walk, go get some soda. I was out of there.
get out. Well, that's a real kind of emotional response to where you were. I mean, it's classic fight or flight, isn't it? You know, and
Oh, yeah.
you wanted to fly.
Yeah, yeah, but not even fly. I didn't want to even show up either. So, so she covered that for us, which is it's required. It's also mandatory, and if you don't show up, these are the consequences. So,
Yeah.
consequences were more painful than showing up. So I showed up.
Yeah, sometimes you do need a bit of an incentive. You know, it's back to your ice cream.
It was all about the ice cream. That's right. That was the one thing I learned. Change the environment if you're stuck.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it does have such a huge impact on people, and I think that our landscape has changed irreversibly since the pandemic. The landscape of our personal lives, our professional lives, risk. You know, I'm in insurance, so the risk landscape has changed, and that has real consequences in terms of the way that we do business, how we talk to one another, how we interact as a team, and how we motivate our people around us to not only come up with new ideas, but also motivate them to be comfortable sharing those ideas, because it's very different sharing your idea in a screen when you're sat there than it is perhaps if you're in a room and you feel comfortable sitting next to somebody. So the way that the landscape has changed in terms of communication after the pandemic has definitely been advantageous to some people who maybe don't thrive in a room and feel much more comfortable sat in their own house with their own surroundings. But for those people who need that stage to perform and to feel that they are building within that energy focus of the room, it's been really tough.
Right. But like me with my company shirt on here, but you know, I have flex pants on underneath. So and
you feel comfortable in your own space. That's a good thing.
Why not? I mean, this is the environment I created to do the best work I can do. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, back to the point about facilitation. If people are on the fence, if they ever get the chance or offered the opportunity to go on a professional facilitators course, even if you hate the idea, even if you think it's the worst thing that can happen to you, especially if you're a behavioral introvert, I would highly recommend you do it, because that 1 week, you know, I still draw on the lessons learned from that 1 week even now, and that was a while ago. So
did you feel the same way throughout the whole week?
No.
No. Okay, that's good.
No, well, it depended, you know. Getting up in the morning, because I also had to drive 40 miles, which was, you know,
It's a long
another
way.
disincentive. So getting up in the morning thing, I used to think, well, can I come up with a logical reason why I don't go? And then I remembered the consequential aspects as if you don't show up.
Yeah.
So
It's
anyway.
amazing, isn't it? Looking kind of the rear view mirror check on that, and you would now recommend it to somebody, but you know, you were getting up in the morning thinking, oh, you know, how can I get out of this? And that change is, you know, that's incredible.
Well, you know, the reality of what changed is that round about day 3.5, 4 out of the 5, I kind of started to get it. So that was part of it, is the fact that I could kind of see the value, and I was kind of getting into the groove of it, even though I was super uncomfortable inside. And then by day 5, we actually did a fun kind of finish up that was more in my comfort zone. And the one trick or the one tip I remember from that, which again can be helpful if you do have behavioral introverts and you can't get them to talk, offer them anonymous post-it note writing for a while.
Okay.
What I mean by that is, so if you know you're still brainstorming for ideas or you want to vote on a solution, you know, if you try and do that in person, put the hand up or yay or nay, you know, a behavioral introvert even isn't going to feel confident, particularly if their vote is controversial.
Yeah.
So what I used to do is offer the, you know, 2-inch by 2-inch post-it note, and you can either write your vote on there anonymously, or you can put some ideas on there anonymously. And even if you don't want me watching you write, I'll walk out of the room.
Yeah.
So that I find is a great tip for behavioral introverts that don't want to speak, or don't want to vote contentiously.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to do if you know that you're potentially you have a very different view to everybody else. That's a difficult position to be in.
Right. And not so much if you're better outwardly communicating, but again, if you're a behavioral introvert, that's super painful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on that course, I'm interested to know, just from my point of view of kind of leaning in that culture, was it pitched to you? Did you come up with that idea, or was that part of the facilitation course?
Both. So the course, why I hated it so much, 70% of it was role playing.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, that's a tough one.
oh, it's like, and role playing in front of other people.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And the way we made up the dynamics of the course is not only were the lean or process improvement leaders there, which I was one, but you had to have basically a supplier and a customer. You could invite a supplier and customer to you from inside the organization to join you.
Okay.
And our senior boss, she was observing.
Oh my goodness, that was a lot of angles of I guess discomfort from most people's point of view. If you weren't finding discomfort in one, you would definitely be finding discomfort in one other area of
Right.
that, I should imagine.
But what was super cool is, again, once I started to get it, that whole perspective of looking at things from a 360-degree viewpoint, boss, customer, supplier, you in the process, it was invaluable in terms of, particularly when a team gets stuck. So everything's great when a team or individuals aren't stuck. It goes really well, right?
Yeah.
And it's comfortable. But when people get stuck or
Yeah.
there's a battle going on, because sometimes it turns into a battle of,
Yeah.
somebody with a strong point of view versus somebody with not such a strong point of view.
Absolutely, and that's a key moment of truth for me in terms of that ability to lean in, because of course your reaction then is to either avoid the conflict and leave,
Right.
or to shut down and not say a thing because you're an introvert and you do not want to say anything that's going to rile up anybody else who may be an extrovert. So I think the ability to have the insight and the emotional intelligence to understand what's going on and to still lean in to those feelings of discomfort, that feeling of adversity, to those people that maybe you are completely different from, and to be curious, inquisitive, and ask the questions as to how they got to that opinion. Please explain that opinion to me. I don't understand. And be vulnerable is so it's on such a human level of connection. And vulnerability for me is a big part of this leaning in process, because vulnerability allows us to connect in a way that's so unique and actually bridges the gap of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, because you can do it online and you can do it face to face.
Absolutely. So I was great for the 3M company that sold a lot of Post-it notes, because I used to a lot of I used to be very popular with this stationery supplier. I used to go through hundreds of Post-it notes a month, literally. So but they're an amazing tool. And then at least so that was for the emotionals. And one little tip I did learn through that and the whole facilitation thing is, for the more analyticals, then particularly for consensus voting, I used to give each person 3 Post-it notes. They could put a 10, a 5, and a 3 on each Post-it note. And when the vote came up, what they liked the absolute best, they could put their 10 to. 5 was I could go either way, and 3 was strongly disagree. And I found that for the analyticals, or the introverted analyticals, was an amazing way to get consensus.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So just 3 Post-it notes. Each person has a 10, 5, and 3 vote. And again, they do it, they can either do it anonymously if they don't want to be seen, in which case, everyone has to leave the room and they do their vote. Or if they're okay, everyone doing it together. And it's amazing that the power of that consensus voting, not only for something positive, but when you're stuck. Using that 10-5-3 to get you unstuck is super quick, super effective. And it's amazing, because even if I don't agree with it, analytically, I know, hey, I have my fair share, I have my chance. This is what the team thinks. So, you know, I need to go with what the team thinks.
And it's giving the team the voice as well. It's giving that voice to the team as a whole, rather than giving the voice to somebody who shouts the loudest. You know, and sometimes we know in meetings that can happen, but giving that voice to everybody really lets you just have a huge amount of diversity and inclusion. And when people are being heard and when people are being listened to, it really allows that connection to happen so much more.
Yep. It's called leveling the playing field, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, we're kind of at time-ish, and thank you so much for your insight. I will do a little brand story outtake before we leave, so don't go away.
I won't.
But tell people if they want to learn more from you and what you're up to, you know, what's the best way to get a hold of you, and what's one thing you got on the horizon for the next quarter?
Well, you can certainly get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can click on my link. I look at my DMs daily, so please feel free to message me. I'm also available on Twitter, and my handle is at Ms. R. Merry, and that is really dedicated to my work-life blend as well, so you can really get an idea of kind of where I'm at with things. Right. I am inquisitive, I am curious, and I am really keen to connect with anybody that really can offer me, but also that I can offer too. So I think there's definitely a two-way street there. In terms of what's coming up for me, I am now part of a brand new team, and I'm super excited to be part of that team. I'm going to be getting out and about in the UK, across the Cotswolds, Herefordshire, Worcestershire, and further afield, as well, as I learn more about the company and how I can have an impact.
Yep. And if people aren't, I mean, I'm familiar because I was born on that side of the country in the UK. And we were talking about, you know, we used to travel the M40 to the same places in the green room. So, but if people aren't familiar, you know, please Google the cities, and you'll see what a beautiful and diverse environment that Rebecca's working in. So good for you.
Thank you.
All right, so don't go away. Again, thanks. Sorry, apologies. I tried to get the comments to work. I can't get them to work. So anyway, if you said something, I'll go back and look. If there's a question, we'll go back and answer it. And here's my little brand story. Not that one. That one.
You're frustrated that you have no time and you just hate it. You lost your mind. You're running around the kids and the spouse, and the business that was once your passion has got you burnt out. So, consult with Bruce, the guy in the blue shirt. He'll help you find the truth so that you can do you first. See, it's all about simpler, faster, better, so you can save massive amounts of time and money, instead of longing for the day where you can finally kick your feet up. Oh, do yourself a favor. Call up Bruce. He'll tell you about process cleanup.
Okay, there we go. I think you're
perfect.
You're back.
Yeah, I'm back. It's still showing us live in my top corner.
Yes, we're still live. I was just,
okay.
Yeah, I do my outtake, and so yeah, that was done by a guy called Devin James, and he's amazing at doing little brand story outtakes. So
amazing, I loved it.
Good. Yeah.
How did you meet him? Was that through your connection and your community?
Yes. And then I met him in person last September when I was on my long road trip. We went and floated on the Columbia River on a seasonal deck bar that they set up just in the summer. So, and he didn't even know it was there. So I found it. So we went, and it's called the Deck. So we floated around having lunch and a few little beverages, and our 1 hour lunch meeting turned into a 4 hour. We had a great time.
No way. That's incredible.
Yeah.
A lot of energy, I would imagine.
Oh, he's super creative. So we we found a lot more common ground than we thought. And then we video chatted with Dr. Nupi Aurora, who lives in Manchester. So yeah.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. So I told my story and sent him all my stuff. And a couple of months later, 2 edits later, that's what he came up with. He's
That's
super
incredible.
top. Yeah. Well, thanks again, Rebecca. We're going to finish the live and I'll just say goodbye offline. So
yeah, thank you very much for having me. I've been so delighted to spend time with you this evening, well, evening for me. And as I say, if anyone does want to contact me, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I would love to connect.
Yeah, and I'll go back and take care of the comments in the replay. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, bye.